Good. Everyone can hear me? Yes. Katsu, yes. Good. Excellent. Okay, we'll start off with our land acknowledgement. And thank you all for coming tonight. It's cold out there. Oh, we got so spoiled. And now you go, uh-oh, winter is coming. The town of Coburg respectfully acknowledges that we are located in the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaty First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog, Rama, Bosalee, and Georgina Island First Nations. The town of Coburg respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaty First Nations have been stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters, and that today remain vigilant over their health and integrity for generations to come. We are all treaty people. Okay, so this meeting kind of concludes 2024, and then I'm going to see you all back in January. So we've got a little bit of a break, so please remember us in the spring and come back for sure. So first up, this Saturday, tomorrow, if you're not already scheduled in for Santa Claus parades and everything else that's happening, we need some volunteers out at Peters Woods. So it's at 9 o'clock in the morning, and you're going to be doing some work to close down the forest, kind of doing some fall cleanup, some trail maintenance, buckthorn removal, facilities. I think that means the outhouse maintenance. So anyone who wants to take part, I mean, there's nowhere better to be on a Saturday than Peters Woods anyway. So please come out and help out. Tuesday, December 3rd. Two important things happening on that day. One being it's my birthday. So, but also that is Giving Tuesday. So please consider renewing your membership and or donating. And it's good if you do it on that specific day. So for a couple of reasons. So reason number one is that an anonymous donor will match $5 for every membership renewed that day, plus $10 for every $100 of donations received. So fabulous. Thank you so much to that donor. And, you know, if you're making a donation, $5, $10, it doesn't have to be a big amount. Everything adds up. And Canada helps if you do it online. On Giving Tuesdays, they will also chip in some money for all donations made on Giving Tuesday. So if you're planning on doing a donation and renew your membership, please do it on Tuesday. And anything else I left out on that, Marina?
I'm going to send a reminder on Sunday.
Oh, and Marina's going to remind us. So that's good too. We are a charity. We do rely solely on those membership fees and donations to bring us all together and keep the club running. So that's fabulous. That's this Tuesday, December 3rd.
Whitney's birthday.
My birthday, yes. Don't forget. Okay, our annual general meeting is going to be in February. It's always in February. And so we're working now towards that to get, you know, our financials in order and our board nominations sorted. So you will have noticed we've been talking a little bit about it at the meetings, and we put out some posts on social media, and we have had people step forward. So that's fabulous. We've got some really good candidates who are willing to stand for election to our board. So that's good news. If you are still holding yourself back, you've got until December 1st, really to just come forward and join our team. We'd love to have you. Speak to any of the board members or email Marina or myself if you would like to do that. And there's also tons and tons of other jobs. If you don't want to be specifically on the board, you can join one of our committees. Big Ideas Committee. So if you're one of those people who are like, oh, dream big, this is a committee for you. We're doing all the big projects. So we'll take all of your great, fantastic ideas and make them happen. The nominations committee, which is working right now, the speakers committee, which helps to decide kind of, right, who's going to come to our meetings and give our talks. Outings committee, I'm sure Richard would love to have some help on that one. Education, which is our scholarship and our awards, and our new marketing committee. So managing marketing material, public relations, you know, communications is such a big part of our world today. So if you're interested in any of those clubs, not clubs, committees, please let me know. Thanks. Family memberships. So many of you belong to kind of a family. Well, of course you belong to a family. We're all family here. And but if you want more than one, if you want more than one email address, just speak to Marina. So you know, if you have you and your partner is getting all the cool things from Willow Beach and you're not getting anything, that's not fair, right? And maybe they're not sharing. So for sure, make sure you're both on our mailing list. Next. Sightings. That's you.
Stand up. You got from me, Marina? Okay. So these are some of the species that have been seen fairly recently around here. More than one person has seen a northern shrike. This is a bird that only comes here in the wintertime. Northern shrikes are a songbird that thinks he's a raptor. Yeah. So if you have a northern shrike in your backyard, you probably won't have very much else in this way of birds because they eat little birds. Yeah. But this species only comes here in the wintertime. You saw that, Marina, yeah? Snow buntings. A few people have seen snow buntings. Bill Castle's, I think, happened at Presqu'île.
So.
I think so. So, and any open field might have them. But they're really hard to see at this time of year because there's no snow. If there's snow, they're much easier to see. But I haven't heard any in the agricultural fields around. You have? Oh, my husband has, but he didn't tell me.
The perfect example there of why you both need your own.
I only have one email. If he doesn't read it, I can. Anyway, but so keep an eye out on agricultural fields that have a little bit of debris or weed seeds, because that's what the birds will eat. And this is Helga's wonderful picture from this just a couple of days ago at Chubb Point. Evening grosbeaks. You've seen some, Marina? Somebody else reported them, and I can't remember who, but they were all from very dispersed areas. Helga's at Chubb Point, which is at the Grafton. Marina is north of Centerton. But there was one other record, which I can't remember. Oh, the Jackmans had them before they went to Africa, but they're in Africa still now. Yeah. So keep your eye out if you're in the areas of the forest. And the only snowy owl that I've heard of around this year so far is at Gull Island at Presqu'île, but they could be anywhere. So keep your eyes out. Yeah, if they're coming, I don't know whether they're coming down in big numbers, but yeah. So keep your eye out. Coburg Harbor is a really good place for snowy owls. And some of the other agricultural fields, but we haven't had a big eruption of them in several years. So maybe, who knows? Keep your eyes. And the rough-legged hawk is a winter hawk. There are few around. So keep your eyes on it. Rough leg means refers to the legs. It has feathers on its legs. Yeah. So you saw one?
Not recently.
Okay, there are not that many around, but there are a few. And trumpeter swans, how many have there been? Trumpeter swans seem to be all over the place. And that was a bird that was almost extirpated in Ontario. It's been since about the 80s. It's been the subject of a really big reintroduction program. But now the birds that we're seeing don't have yellow wing tags. For a long time, you could always tell a trumpeter swan because it had a yellow wing tag, because they were part of a captive raised release program. But these are not. So you have to look very carefully at your black-billed swans these days, because in the earlier in the fall, they could be tundra. They could be migrants going north. Oh, and this was a Ross's goose that was visiting Garden Hill Pond. Yeah, several people saw it. It's a little smaller than the Canada geese. It's a white goose. And lots of people saw that bird. It was really cool. Thanks, Chris, for the picture. And this is probably the most famous bird of Northumberland County this fall. It's a white ibis juvenile. White ibises should be in Florida. They don't usually come this far north ever, but except for this one. This one got lost, didn't have a very good compass. This one turned up in Port Hope Harbor. Lots of people saw it. I did not. Despite the fact that several people who went before me and after me, including my husband, saw it. So it was around there somewhere, but I didn't see the bird. And when we were in Florida, the one time we've been in Florida, white ibises were feeding on the median of the highway. So they're very common there, but around here they're not. So. And the American tree sparrow, they're coming in. This is again a winter bird. They'll be around here all winter. The ones with the little red cap in the wintertime are tree sparrows. They're not chickies. They're tree sparrows.
Oh.
Yeah. They're probably not chicken sparrows. Oh yeah, and there have been a few crossbills. Is that a red? No, white-winged crossbill. There have been a few crossbills, and they again would be in the forest probably. If you're not familiar with crossbills, their beaks look like this, and it's on purpose, so they can pry apart the scales on conifer cones to get at the seeds. Now, most birds are like this. Crossbills are like this, and it's not something that's weird. That's how they live. Is that all?
That's it.
Yeah. Anybody else have anything else exciting? Yeah? Yeah. There was a raven over Coburg, which is a pretty unusual bird for over Coburg at Stewart Street in Coburg. We've had a fair number of them. We've had a fair number of them on the Westerville count. Yeah. They probably are nesting somewhere in there. But, they didn't used to nest this far south, but somewhere in the 90s, Roger found a nest in the Northumberland forest. For a few years, they nested on a structure in what I call Sleeman's gravel pit. It belongs to somebody else now on Cranberry Road. They seem to have abandoned that site, but they seem to be relatively regular. So keep an eye on the big black birds you see. They're not all crows. Yeah.
When we were at Presqu'île on Tuesday, we did see snow buntings on Owen Point.
Snow bunnies on Owen Point. So
A big flock, like
so
I don't know how many.
So if you have occasion to go to Presqu'île, that's a fairly good place to look for snow buntings.
There's quite a few small flocks of bluebirds around still.
Yeah.
On Haskell Road, they were sitting on the lines there. And also there's a nice little back road called Garland Road that goes off Dale Road. And there was a small collection there, so they seem to be having
That was again, mild fall. Margaret's reporting a lot of eastern bluebirds. west of, a lot of them are west of Port Hope on Haskell Road. They nest out there, so you might take a look at the birds on the wires. They could be a bluebird. Yeah. So, yeah.
I had an interesting sighting. I was piling wood into my woodshed, and about 7 feet up to my right, I noticed something blocked the light. Okay, so figured it must have been something to do that, like, to cause that. So I started to study the area, and all of a sudden a head popped up with 2 round ears and 2 beady eyes looking right at me. Okay.
And what were those beady eyes?
It was a weasel. Okay.
It was a weasel, yeah.
It was a weasel. And I couldn't tell if it was a short tail or long tail. And people know here, short tail has white feet when you see them at all times. Okay. Well, the long tail doesn't. It's brown all the time. And the short tail becomes the ermine.
There was somebody in Port Hope posted a picture of an ermine, thinking it was somebody's pet that had got lost. It wasn't on the Willow Beach site.
I had an ermine a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Found it, but it was dead in the garden.
Yeah, but this one was quite alive. If you have one, you won't have any mice. Yeah, because that's what they eat. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, so it's really been mild. So there's no ice for the gulls to roost on, but there should be, and there's nothing to sort of concentrate the waterfowl, which could be here. So, but keep your eyes out. You never know what you're going to see.
Richard didn't mention the 3 snow geese on the harbor
Oh, yeah.
that he got a photo of. I went down and saw them as they flew away. Okay, so we've had a couple of outings since our last meeting, one of which was the shorebird outing. What did I say? I want to make those waterfowl shorebirds. Yeah. And so Roger was saying that there were 12 people out for the outing. I don't know how many birds you saw, how many species. 50.
I think.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, okay, and that was the waterfowl outing. On November the 19th, we had the Wesleyville count, and it was a very, very slow day, beautiful weather, not a lot of birds. But we did have 52 species of birds and about 15, 16 people participating in the count. And it was it was just a very pleasant walk. Coming up on December the 14th is the Coburg Port Hope count. And then that followed on the Sunday, the 15th, with the Presqu'île Winterbird count. So if you're interested in participating in those, Roger's the man to talk with.
About that Presqu'île.
Not Presqu'île, but you would take them along, right? Yeah, January 1st is the Rice Lake Plains winter count. And in January, Katsu is going to be leading an owling outing. We haven't decided on a date yet, but if you're interested in hopefully seeing some owls this year, of course, that's always weather dependent and depending what's happening in the North Country. I'm still looking to do a feeder tour in January or February, and a snow bunting outing in somewhere between January and March. And also a winter walk, just a plain winter walk in either between January and February, or January and March as well. Our next outings committee meeting will be on January the 7th. So if any of you have any suggestions that you would like to make, any events that you would like to participate in, please let me know. We'd be happy to discuss them and do some planning. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so our speaker tonight, Jennifer Peaslee. And my first question for Jennifer and maybe for you guys too is it possum or is it opossum? Because I've always kind of gone with the opossum, but I'm going to be interested to see what Jennifer has to say to me. She might correct me by the end. So Jennifer holds a Bachelor of Science in Entomology from Cornell University, and I understand that spiders is kind of her little interest there, and a minor in infectious disease biology, focusing on science communication. So that's also very cool. She's been with the Cornell Wildlife Health Lab for 8 years and Cornell University for 13 years. And she's currently the program's web content manager and social media administrator. She's committed to wildlife health outreach and educating the public, such as us, on the value of wildlife population health, sharing how disease surveillance is essential in predicting and preventing outbreaks. Tonight, Jennifer is going to share her knowledge of the Virginia Opossum, and we will walk away tonight with a greater understanding of these fascinating and valuable creatures of the night. And keep your eyes open because I'm seeing them on my street. So if you're out and about, they're not always raccoons. Okay, take it away, Jennifer.
Hi, thank you very much. A pleasure to be here. I'm going to go ahead and start right off with sharing my screen. And thank you for the intro. That was great. It'll help me skip a couple of slides. You can see my screen okay, I think?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. So yeah, my name is Jennifer. I really enjoy working with the Cornell Wildlife Health Lab. It's been an exciting experience for me. This picture right here is one of the many black bear den surveys that I was able to participate in. And that was one of the first experiences I had where I was completely hooked. So we go out with, excuse me, collaborating institutions and universities, wildlife agencies, and we do surveys of black bear dens in the winter, of course, in New York State. And the bear cubs are very small, as you can see, and they need to be kept at a very steady temperature. So they're put in these little thermal bags, and then we get to put them in our coat and keep them nice and warm until the biologists are done taking samples and checking the health of the mother as well as the rest of the cubs. So it was, I was hooked after that. I mean, who wouldn't be hooked after getting to like snuggle with a real teddy bear? So it was a great introduction to wildlife for me. But I do have a true passion, and that, of course, is entomology. I'm very interested in spiders. I have a couple myself. Very fascinating. Their behavior is very, very individual. It's so many different things that spiders do, and I do consider them wildlife, just to keep on theme. But they really encouraged me to go back to school to get my degree, and that's how I ended up with a Bachelor's of Science in Entomology. I took a spider biology class one day, and that was it. So you never know what you're going to find until you go out and try and experience new things. And as she mentioned, I'm very jazzed about excuse me, wildlife health outreach. It's one of my favorite things. I think there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings about the importance of wildlife, whether they're a nuisance or a positive influence on the environment is a personal perspective. And if you are able to change even one person's opinion on it, I think that's a win. So I do spend a lot of time trying to encourage and share knowledge about how wildlife can help improve your life as well as you improve your landscape, the ecosystem, everything, because it really is that one health tenet, it's pretty spot on because everything really is connected. So the Wildlife Health Lab is a pretty awesome. Sorry, was somebody thought I heard somebody? Sorry. Okay. The Wildlife Health Lab is a pretty unique program at Cornell University. We have a really diverse group of people who are a part of it, which uh, makes it stand out, makes us a useful tool. We get contacted by a lot of other states in the United States to request engagement so that we can help them set up a program that's similar to what we have in New York State. We've worked really hard with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and we've created something called the New York State Wildlife Health Program, which between the two entities is a really exceptional collaborative endeavor where we take the academic side and the science side behind how things work and the field side of the people who are out there actually doing, touching, collecting, seeing disease, all of those things, and we merge them. So we have like this really broad area of expertise where we work with wildlife medicine, we do disease ecology, molecular biology and genetics, pathology. We actually have I call her a mathematician, but it's bioinformatics. She's a mathematician, but I find math to be very difficult. So I think it's magical that she loves it and she's really good at it. And we also have a data analyst who does ArcGIS mapping and surveys. And it's just so many different things that we can combine with what the state agencies themselves offer to create really unique research opportunities and activities across the state and across the country, and helping to establish plans for prevention in disease outbreaks by using wildlife surveillance as a tool. So just a little extra background on the coolness of where I work. But of course, we're here to talk about the amazing Virginia opossum. So I'm a huge fan. I have a tendency to really vote for the underdog, and the opossum is definitely considered an underdog. I don't know why. I think they're pretty fabulous. They're often considered a nuisance, but they are also the only marsupial species in North America. And being unique, I think makes them stand out and be more awesome. So they have really cool traits. Playing possum is not just a slang term, it's something that they actually do. And there's been myths about like their toxin immunity and they could survive 50 million bee stings. That's a little bit of an exaggeration, but not too far off the mark. So they have these really incredible adaptations to make them stand out and unique and just darn interesting. And they've been around for a really long time. So just after the dinosaurs went extinct, the opossum emerged, so to speak. And I just wanted to clear up because a lot of people think opossum and possums are the same thing. So I don't want there to be any confusion. Most opossums are in Australia, and everything it seems to be awesome in Australia. So I'm a big fan, especially because they have a lot of really cool spiders in Australia. But that's what most people think of when they think of a marsupial. So, and I put a little effort into explaining what marsupials were in case people just don't know. Most people think of things like the platypus or kangaroos. Platypuses aren't marsupials, just as an FYI, but kangaroos, koala bears, all of those really cool critters down under are a lot of them are marsupials. That's where the majority of marsupials is in Australia. And there are also a lot of possums. Drop the O, possums. And there's over 20 species in Australia. I think the last count was 23 species of possums. And that includes sugar gliders, which are unfortunately very popular in the pet trade. Bushy tail, or excuse me, brush tail. I call them bushy tail because they have their tail is just poof, enormous. So there's a lot of variety of species, but they're very different than the Virginia opossum because I think there's only one that's a scaly-tailed possum in Australia, and all the rest of them have bushy, hairy tails. They have smaller, I don't want to say litters. I don't know how they classify them. They're called joeys, but they have smaller clutches than the Virginia opossum typically. But and the other possums, these possums don't play dead like the North American opossum. They're the only marsupial in North America, as well as the only possum that plays dead, which is kind of cool. The world's smallest possum is the little pygmy. I don't know if you can see that teeny tiny picture on the very far left. That little guy is just a little bit bigger than a man's thumb. They're pretty cute. Let's see. And where do you find them? Well, like I said, most of them are in Australia. About 2/3 of all marsupials on the planet live in Australia. But South America has about 130 species of marsupials. So, and they have the only semi-aquatic, I said aquatic, apologies, aquatic species that has webbed feet, hind feet. So that's one of the cool things about opossums is their thumbs. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But being that there's unique adaptations is just like a hint as to how cool the opossum is, because it literally, it's a perfect example of adapting to your environment. The ones that live in Australia are very, very much designed for the environment of the outback. So kangaroos, koalas, all of that. And then the most common ones you find in South America are actually called shrew possums, which are small and really cute. And they live in the trees and which is a perfect environment for them because the rainforest is very adaptable to them. So let's see. Over 300 species of marsupials. I think that's pretty cool for something that we consider to not be the most current stage of evolution. There's quite a few of them still hanging out there. And the key thing about being a marsupial is that they're pouched mammals. So I think whenever somebody thinks of pouched mammal, the first thing, of course, that they think of, in my mind anyhow, is kangaroos, because that's, you see that one or two joeys in a kangaroo pouch, and it's just a kind of an iconic representation. But this little picture right here is an opossum, and it's just one of usually about 10 to 12, depending on how many teats the mother has. Excuse me. But the cool thing about marsupials is that pouched life, basically. So they are able to hang out, I guess is a good way of putting it, hang out for sometimes 100 or more days, depending on the species, in this pouch, so that they get a weird jump on life in the backwards sense, if that makes any sense at all. And all the mammals alive today are divided into 3 groups, one of them being marsupials, the other being placental mammals, which most of us know off the top of our heads is cows, horses, dogs, people, etc. And monotremes, which I find really, really cool because that is the platypus that um, I just think is a hodgepodge of so many different species. It's awesome. So, and it's all about their method of reproduction. So, about 95% of all mammals on the planet are placental mammals, and they give birth to pretty well-developed young. And I mean, it's based on the environment and the ecology of where these animals live as to how I believe how they actually develop and whether they're going to survive if they are born as a marsupial is very underdeveloped and live in a pouch versus an animal that's going to be able to hit the ground running in a relatively quick fashion like a placental mammal. And that's a capybara right there, which I don't know if people know or like, but they're awesome. They're giant rodents, so to speak. And then monotremes, of course, are the egg-laying mammals. There's only a handful that are still existing, and the platypus and echidnas are the most well-known, and shockingly, they are also from Australia. So, and I think one of the cool things about these guys is that most people or scientists have recently um, determined that the marsupial is not a intermediate stage in evolution between because it's always been thought that it was not its actual an actual I don't want to say planned evolution, but I think you know what I mean, where it's an actual stage on its own versus a transitional state in evolution. And it's been debated for some time. Apparently, it recently has been revealed that it's not an intermediate stage. It's actually a stage beyond evolution, the evolution of the placental mammal. So it's kind of cool that while they thought it was like an intermediate step, it's actually the next step. So let's see. That to me, I found pretty interesting. It's another notch on the belt for the underdog to go move ahead, you know what I mean? So the cool stuff about opossums, they are omnivores. These guys eat everything. They're opportunistic feeders and will eat pretty much anything they find, including insects, small animals, including venomous ones, fruits, vegetables that are left out, and really some really gross stuff, including carrion. I mean, the picture on the left is somebody eating what looks to be like the remnants of a dead bird that it probably found out and about, maybe waterfowl that died out in the wild. And then the next guy is eating a huge earthworm, and there's just nothing off limits. They're pretty good at cleaning up anything. And the reason that they eat anything is because they have a short lifespan. That's pretty much, they can eat pretty much anything that they want. 2 years in the wild is considered a long life for an opossum. There are cases in captivity in zoo environments where they've lived 4 years. That is very rare. And I think that I think they know they have a short lifespan and they just are happy to eat their way through it. I support their efforts in that myself. So, yeah. And the other cool thing about opossums is they are nomads within reason. I mean, life is short, so they just don't want to stay in one home for too long. I say home specifically because they have a decent home range for being a kind of a clumsy, ambly little mammal. And they average between 50 and 300 acres, depending on the habitat composition and resources. So they really prefer a riparian forest area, which is just like a regular wooded forest near water. They are always going to gravitate towards anything with a stream, freshwater. Vernal pools sometimes will sustain them, but typically they're looking for a stream, a creek, a river, or lakeside. I mean, who wouldn't want to live lakeside? But they don't have like a permanent residence typically. They typically live on the go. So they'll hang out, and as soon as they'll hang out in one location, and as soon as the food availability dips, or maybe the weather changes, or there's an increase in predators or anything along those lines, then they move on to the next location, which could be anything from an unoccupied burrow. I've had them live under my shed, tree hollows, porches, wood piles. I heat with a wood stove, so it's nothing to find a random opossum hanging out in my wood pile. They don't bother me, I don't bother them. But they're pretty versatile. They don't mind not having a home to call their own. I think that's pretty interesting. That's like the RV community of the mammal population, and they just want to keep on moving. It makes sense knowing that they have a shorter lifespan. So I know there was some interest in their geographic range, and this map is pretty cool. It's recent, excuse me, and so opossums originated in the Southeast. For the most part, they traveled up from South America, Mexico. There is quite a healthy opossum population in Mexico. This map doesn't include that, unfortunately. So the light gray at the bottom of this shows the historical range from about 1900 on, and as it goes north and grays out, to the darker gray, that's more recent. That's what's happened in the last maybe 100 years. Opossums have moved further north, and their population densities are usually associated with those riparian corridors, like moving along a river system or a water system. Wetlands are not as favorable as a swamp or lake or anything like that, only because there's not a lot of tree cover in a wetland environment. It's mostly just grasses. It's not so much of a cover for them to hang out in. So their movement has been positively associated with those corridors, road density, and developed areas, especially agriculture. Agriculture has made it easier for the opossum to move along, so to speak. And the mobility mindset that they've had, along with impacts of climate change and, it being warmer a lot longer in the season, the more north you go, it's made it easier for them to move further north. And there's like a strip on the West Coast that is believed to have been somebody took some out as a pet. There might have been at one point I don't know what the right word is, but opossum farming for meat back in the 30s. But the first incidence of opossums on the West Coast was around the time of the Dust Bowl in the United States. So when Oklahoma experienced its Dust Bowl, I think it was in like the 1930s, and a lot of people moved west after that. And I think the opossums, went along for the ride. Why not? They seem to like to move around. So, and now, of course, they're enjoying Canada. So I tracked down reports from them in Eastern and Southern Ontario, Quebec, and as far as the Fraser Valley in British Columbia. So if folks are seeing them, it is not a surprise. And I don't think it's a bad thing. But I also I enjoy opossums. It's not a surprise for me to have like bear walk through my backyard. So I'm in central New York, where it's all lovely and wooded, and it's very common for me to see a lot of wildlife in my yard. So um, what makes it easy for them is they are so adaptable, and they've just really appreciated how poorly people take care of their garbage. So one of their biggest things is they can smell. They have an ultra sensitive sense of smell, and will continue to come back because they also, despite having a relatively small brain, opossums are only about the size of a house cat. Um, they remember where they found food previously, so they will continue to return, which I think is pretty cool. And they go unnoticed for the most part, excuse me, so they can really thrive in an urban setting. And like I said, they really appreciate the unsecured trash cans and will just keep coming back. All of the things that we do for our benefit, all those anthropogenic changes to land use that we've done from urbanization and agriculture just make it really easy for them to find resources, and makes it a little bit easier to become predators, so to speak. And they're not predators, which is why I find it amusing, is that we've basically turned them into little hunting machines, and they will just run around hunting rodents and garbage, and what we don't want, they will happily take. So they're pretty easygoing, and as you can see, they can fit in almost anything. I found them in random things, like I left a camping chair out one winter and it tipped over and it got buried in the snow, and a possum turned it into a den. So pretty adaptable, and they dig the nightlife. They are very nocturnal. You will see them in the day on occasion, but that's when it's really cold and they decide that it's going to be too cold for them to come out at night, so they'll come out during the day to search for food. People often think that when they see wildlife during the day that it's a problem, that it's a threat or risk, etc. No, that's not the case with the opossums. They're almost never in a hurry. They don't really ever chase anything or anyone. They they're my spirit animal, I think, sometimes, because they just chill out and they take their time going to and fro, and they're almost always looking for food. So, I think a lot of people can relate to that. Yeah. And the other really cool thing about opossums, even though they don't look it, is they are obsessive groomers. People see them and often think that they're like dirty and scraggly, and they just don't look good. But the truth is they are insanely obsessive, and they groom themselves. I found a study that said that the average opossum grooms itself more than an obsessive grooming cat. And I don't know if anybody there has an obsessive grooming cat who will lick his own fur off, but I have. And that's a lot. That's saying a lot. There's also the myth that they will eat a lot of ticks, that they are tick eating machines. And it's partially true, because they will pick off 90 to 95% of the ticks that are on their body and eat them. So in that aspect, they are tick eating machines, but it's secondary to them grooming, which I think is interesting, because if you've ever seen an opossum in the wild, it looks like he's had a rough night. They don't often look like they've just groomed themselves for 3 hours, but yeah. And it's also a mechanism for them to cool down, to lift their fur, etc., because they don't sweat. They don't have any sweat glands like a lot of other animals do. And On a side note, it's just to me, I enjoy the when an animal proves common assumption incorrect, and one of those things is that they act and smell like a corpse a lot of the time, and are known to not be a sanitary animal, and they're actually, like I said, one of the cleanest out there. So to me, I find that very amusing. And if anybody's out there looking for added tick control, just so people are aware, non-chemical solutions, of course, turkeys gobble, haha, more ticks than any wild animal or domestic, to be honest with you. They spend a lot of time hunting and foraging in the brush, and that's prime location for ticks. So the wild turkeys are actually the real tick eating machines because they eat them versus groom themselves. And then if you're looking for solutions in your yard, you could probably do guinea fowl. I don't know if people know anything about guinea fowl. I have guinea fowl. They are very loud and bark like dogs. But I grew up on a horse farm, and it was something we always had because they are a natural form of tick control. So we'd buy a flock every other year or so and just let them loose in the pastures, and they would keep the tick population under control. So there's a lot of birds that do it for you if you're interested in keeping your yard clean. I don't know how far north ticks are, if they're too far north into Canada. Someone will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but we have a lot of ticks. We have a lot of incidents of Lyme disease. Ticks are one of the fastest moving species northward in the last probably 50 years. So we don't like ticks. Anyhow. And so not only are they clean, as we know, they wander a lot. The nomadic life does not take a break. They wander all winter long. They do not hibernate. Their lifespan is too short. And they have a weird metabolism. I don't know enough about it. It was hard to find too much, but their metabolism is just like flat all the time. It doesn't change, and they don't build up any fat reserves. So they need to eat all year round. They don't stop, they don't hibernate, they'll call a day in the den for weather when it gets too cold for too long, but they don't have the option to not go out and forage for food. And I think that's, of course, part of the reason they eat anything and everything that they can get their little hands on. They tolerate cold temps to about 20 degrees Fahrenheit, but below that are more prone to frostbite. And if the temps stay below 20 for too long, frostbite is something they'll see on their ears, their tail, and sometimes their feet. So, all right, so those are some of the basics about the amazing opossum. Now, here are some of the problems that opossums encounter. And the top threat is, excuse me, human caused, and that's roadkill. So opossums were, I think, number 4 on the top 10 of things that are killed on the road annually in the United States. So 19 million Virginia opossums every year die on the road, unfortunately. And the important thing about roadkill and opossums is, depending on what time of year it is, excuse me, depending on what time of year it is, there is a possibility that opossum on the side of the road has babies in its pouch. So I have a little video, if I can show really quick. And this is for people. So we work with the Cornell Janet L. Swanson Wildlife Hospital quite a lot, and we coordinate with licensed wildlife rehabbers in New York State to try and help with their needs, their understanding of disease, prevention, testing, all of those things to make it a little bit easier for them to help wildlife because in the grand scheme of things, there's not enough people or money in any government agency that's going to be able to help wildlife as well as a person would be able to help wildlife. So let me show you really quick. Can everybody see this okay?
Yep.
Okay. This is just a really quick video of a wildlife rehabilitator who has found a dead possum along the side of the road in, I believe it was February. And she is removing live babies from the pouch. Really quick. It's that simple. I know that sounds weird to say it that way, but it's one of the things that actually saves a lot of baby opossums because their survival rate is pretty low to begin with. And most people, we don't tell people to take the babies off if they find a dead animal with live babies in the pouch. The best thing you can do is take the actual body with the babies inside to a wildlife rehabilitator, and they are often able to save them. So I don't know what the roadkill rate, there was no information that I could find for Canada, and I'm sure it's because the populations are probably so isolated, but it's a problem in the US, unfortunately. And of course, because they eat carrion, guess, half of the time the opossums are on the road eating something that has already been hit. So it's a little bit more of a common thing down here. But so natural predators for opossums are things like coyotes, bobcats, foxes, large raptors. I saw a clip of a great horned owl swooping down and taking a full size an opossum, which was, like I said, they're the size of a large cat, so maybe 15 pounds. But one of the worst things is actually people's dogs, because when an opossum is in its playing dead state, it goes all in, and it doesn't come out of it even when a dog is harming it. So domestic dogs are often the greatest cause of injury in opossums in wildlife rehabilitation. So they don't really move fast. I mean, I don't know if anybody has seen an opossum try to hustle. I run faster, and that says a lot. So there are other problems that opossums face. And a big one is that we're just starting to research now is lead toxicosis. So we see it in, we did a huge study at the Cornell Wildlife Health Lab on bald eagles. We did like a historical study from like a 30-year time span to try and determine the impact of lead ammunition left on the landscape on raptor populations. And it was a pretty big impact on the reproduction rates of bald eagles who had just started to recover from the use of DDT on the landscape, which was a pesticide. I don't know if folks know a lot about that or not, but the opossum, because they're an opportunistic feeder and, they will eat anything in front of them. And that includes a carcass that's been left behind by a hunter, the gut pile, the offal that, when someone field dresses a deer or moose, they leave it behind and the opossum will eat it. And unfortunately, Lead is not good in any quantity, and because of their, what they eat and their foraging behaviors, they're quite prone to intake a lot of lead, and then as a result will be injured because they don't feel good. There's lethargy. They're weak. They can't really move fast. They'll circle. They just can't really function well, and then they often get injured as a result. And left untreated, it would cause severe neurologic signs like seizures and most likely death. And historically, it's not something that we've done a lot of testing on, that anyone, I should say, any state agency has done a lot of testing on lead on their mammal populations. And it's just recently become more of a interest to a lot of other species besides iconic species like bald eagles or California condors, which it's now illegal to use lead ammo in California altogether. So, hopefully policy change will catch up with us and it won't be an issue anymore. But there are new studies on mesocarnivores like the opossum, fishers, foxes, excuse me, and scavenging raptors like bald eagles and hawks that show the incidence of lead poisoning from lead ammo and carcasses and gut piles that are left behind from hunting. And there's not really much you can do except for chelation therapy. It's the same thing you would do for a person or your dog, etc., to help remove the lead from the system, from their system. I have lots of videos on bald eagles with neurologic signs when we were doing our campaign to help. We try and do a little campaign right before hunting season to remind people that what they leave behind often affects wildlife in ways that they don't plan. And unfortunately, it's the species like the opossum, who are often considered nuisance animals, that are overlooked. And more and more rehabilitation, wildlife rehabilitation groups are noticing that it really affects them in a very negative way. Excuse me. One of the other problems that we see a lot of is rodenticide poisoning. So rodenticide poisoning, excuse me, it comes in a couple of different varieties, anticoagulant and non-anticoagulant. And unfortunately, neither one's good for the species, the non-target species. And anticoagulant, of course, most people know anticoagulant means it prevents bleeding or prevents clotting, so leads to bleeding, excuse me. And animals can be seen to have like bruising or blood in their urine or feces or a small cut, and they could bleed to death. We had a case where we had a hawk that had come in that had been had high levels, and it had a cut on its foot pad, and that cut on its foot pad costed its life because it had rodenticide poisoning. And it's really tough because there's currently no blood test for birds for anticoagulant rodenticide exposure. Our group, the Cornell Wildlife Health Lab, is working with our coagulation lab at the Animal Health Diagnostic Center at Cornell to try and develop one. There's ones for dogs, and I believe there's ones for cats. There's some for mammals, but birds have a very different physiology, and it makes it really difficult. So non-anticoagulant rodenticide toxicity symptoms are actually more difficult to spot. And unless you can pinpoint, yes, I saw this animal eat such and such, it's often difficult to detect. And the lethargy, pale gums, the same limb weakness, it's not a bleeding thing. So it could be a number of different things. So it makes it a little bit more difficult, unfortunately. So this, I wanted to give a shout out to, so this is the Wildlife Center. This image is from the Wildlife Center of Virginia, and they're one of my favorite groups. They do awesome outreach to try and inform and help share ways that people could help wildlife species. So I highly recommend if anybody's interested in what it might take to be involved in the rehabilitation craze. I would highly encourage checking them out because they have a pretty unique program that's pretty expansive. I have one of their shirts and it's my favorite one. It says keep calm and carry on, and it's carrion as in CARRION, because they had a turkey vulture that was there for a really long time and it ended up becoming their educational ambassador animal, and her name was Buttercup. And so they did t-shirts with Buttercup and keep calm and carry on, and it was a fundraising thing, and it was just like really awesome. So they really want to expose people to different species, because when you think of turkey vultures, that's not really an awesome people have the same reaction as they do to opossums. So thinking of one named Buttercup, I don't think is bad. I think that's awesome. And now let's get into some of the really cool stuff with mating. So their breeding season is really early. So when I mentioned earlier that rehabbers in this area start looking for opossums along the side of the road in February and March, that's to see if there are actual live animals. That's when they actually start showing up. They have a really early breeding season, and they can have 2, sometimes 3 litters in a year, depending on where they are. So the more southeasterly living population, definitely they could have broods as late as October, because of course it's warmer, different environment, and they have such limited mating. They have they don't care. They don't do displays of anything. It's just not their way. This is the extent of their mating. Hopefully you can hear this. That little clicking, almost like a snap. That's it. That's the effort that they put in. They don't go all out. They are not the birds of paradise. They don't do the dances and the waving and the singing. They click at you. You're either interested or you're not. And if you're not, they don't care. It's they're just so easygoing. I know it's like I can't stand it. But they have some weird stuff going on. So their cool reproductive traits include a bifurcated penis and paired sperm. So way back in the 1600s, when opossums were first described by John Smith, the myth was that they had this penis, the two forked penis, so they could mate with the female opossum through her nose, because that seemed feasible. I'm not quite sure how, but fear not. The female has a bifurcated reproductive tract, so it actually works out, which I just think is hilarious. And it's also very interesting that they have paired sperm. So it's hopefully you could see in this picture really well. I was the best picture that I could get where the sperm heads actually pair up and come out. They're ejaculated as a team, and then they split off right before they're about to fertilize an egg, which it might start out as like a team event, but thankfully it doesn't end up that way. And it's weird. What's weird about it, in my opinion, is the North American marsupials are the only ones that do it, that have the paired sperm. The Australian marsupials don't. And there's a lot of hypotheses about why that is, saying that the pairing of the spermatozoa increases motility to the female reproductive tract to make sure that they actually impregnate the female. It's just interesting, I think. It's just they've got to be different. There's nothing wrong with doing things different, and the opossum really goes all in. And then so after there's impregnation, the gestation short is so short. It's technically 12 days is the shortest, and that is actually the typical gestation period of a Virginia opossum. It is really 12 to 13 days at the most. And they really are that tiny. They're actually bee-sized when they first come out of the uterus, and they crawl their way to one of the teats that the female has. They usually, I think it happens within like a really short amount of time, the crawling to the teat. I don't think the teat's very far from the pouch, or excuse me, from the uterus. The teats are in the pouch, excuse me. But they really are the size of a dime. They're completely hairless, they're blind, you don't see them. If you were to probably look at an opossum when she first has the I want to say babies, joeys, thank you, joeys. You probably wouldn't even notice that she had anything in there, because they're that small. And they usually stay in the pouch until probably 2 months, and then they start to open their eyes. That's when they'll start to come out. They'll piggyback on mom. And I find this hilarious because the opossum on the right is not pregnant. The opossum on the right has large joeys in her pouch. But she will carry them around until they are probably 2 to 3 months old. And then when I think it's about 3 to 4 months, and then they leave the pouch and they basically just hang around on mom on her back. And then they'll just become too heavy. Or I tried to find some of the pictures where you see they've turned them into memes down here in the US, where it's the picture of every mom in the world with 10 or 12 little opossum babies clinging to her back, and she looks like she's just ready to call it quits. That's a pretty popular meme down here. But I think what's sad about it is that beside their short lifespan, the fact that maybe 10% of the joeys live more than a year. Only about 10% live more than a year. So if they have 10 to 12 joeys each clutch, then that's 1 to 2 that will survive beyond a year. So makes sense that they have multiple broods a year, 3 when they can, but their lifespan and their the risks that they face, unfortunately, population stays pretty stagnant. It doesn't grow, unfortunately. So here's some of the cool stuff. Here's some of the weird stuff that opossums have that make them, I think, pretty interesting. So they have the most teeth of any mammal in North America, which is 50. But they are not aggressive. This opossum in this picture right here is trying to intimidate something that it perceives as a threat. And it'll hiss like a cat, and bare its teeth, and that's it. That's the extent of the aggressiveness of an opossum. But as you can see, look at how clean he is. Just evidence of the grooming. More weird stuff. They have opposable thumbs on their back feet. Not their front feet, their back feet, which I think is adorable. Unfortunately, this opossum came into us with multiple injuries, and I could not wait to see his feet, just because they're just, I think, adorable. And they actually use their back feet to climb more than they use their tail. Their tail is not for climbing. And they are the only non-primate mammal in the US with opposable thumbs. So I think that's kind of cool also. Another really cool thing about the opossum. And then let's talk about the tail. The tail that looks like a rat. I think that's part of the reason it gets such a bad rap, of course, is that it is the rat-like tail. But this prehensile tail is really cool, and it's used for balancing on trees, not hanging. I know my picture shows a cute little baby opossum hanging by its tail, and that is what they do when they're very small and young. That opossum in that picture is maybe 3 to 4 months old. Once it gets beyond that, it can't do that. So, but what it does do is it operates like a second hand or a fifth hand, and it carries stuff around. That opossum is not wearing a dress. He has got a whole bunch of leaves to take to make up a den somewhere. It's going to find a place to hang out for the night, and it wants to stay warm. And it'll walk around with those leaves and stuff in its tail. And its front feet, I wish I'd taken a picture of the front feet. Its front feet are for digging, grabbing, or not digging, grabbing, like grabbing food and eating food. They're not for much of anything else. And I don't know if anybody's seen an opossum walk. They're not super graceful. So it's not like it could hold something in one of its paws and hobble along on 3 feet. It's pretty much got to use that tail for something other than looks. So, and then the thing that everybody wants to know about is playing possum. So playing possum is called thanatosis. And it's actually a really cool catatonic state that's not the same as, but if you think of fainting goats or death fainting beetles, I don't know if those are familiar to people at all. They stiffen and they fall over and they can't move. And it's a state that is not always good for them, but they go all in. This is what I love about them. They have no shame. They poop. They excrete some foul smelling stuff. They'll start drooling. They look and smell like they are dead, so that nobody will eat them, because wildlife, they don't all eat dead stuff. There's, that's not what their favorite thing to do is. That's an opportunistic meal when they can't, is that they will eat something that's dead unless they have like the stomach for it, like our friends here, the opossum. So what they do, and they can actually stay in this death state for, I think the longest it's been recorded is 4 hours, which is like, that's dedication. And what it is this, it's basically all voluntary activity ceases, and they get into this posture that like is playing possum. They want you to think that they are dead so that you will not eat them. The bad thing about it is that they also will not break the state even if they're harmed. So this is where things like domestic dogs come into play, because dogs, as we all know, are dogs, and they are relentless when they find something and they want to play with it or bite it or hurt it, or they just want to know what's going on with it. They can actually cause more harm to a possum that is pretending to be dead than if the possum were actually trying to defend itself, which they don't do. This is their defense mechanism. They bare their teeth, they hiss, and then they fall over and play dead. That's it. And I have a video. I don't know if it'll play from here. Let's see. Sorry. I'm gonna pop right ahead. This documentary right here, by the way, is awesome. It's called Playing Possum, and it's a short doc about the most misunderstood marsupial, and it's about a rehabilitation center and how they take care of opossums. And I just find it was an awesome little video. So this is going to be just a quick little 30 seconds about what an opossum does when it literally wants to play dead. Oh. There. So I don't know if you were able to see it in that one when she turned it over, the green stuff on his butt right there. You can almost see it there, lime green. That is the oily, foul smelling stuff that they excrete so that you will think they are a rotting corpse and not eat them. Which if it were a life or death, I would happily do that as well. I would rather not be eaten. So I think it's a pretty weird, but also very cool defense mechanism. This is the definition of a pacifist, right? Anyhow, I highly recommend the little documentary. I think it's like 12 minutes. It's just really cute. They show you the process of rehabilitation, risks that opossums face, and how they release them back in the wild, which is always the goal. And then here's some really cool science stuff. So immunity, there's so many like little myths about opossums that they can survive 100 honeybee stings and rattlesnake bites and all this other stuff. Well, those aren't myths. They are actually true. And it's because opossums produce a protein that's known as lethal toxin neutralizing factor, LTNF, excuse me. And it neutralizes various toxic components of cytotoxic snake venom. So cytotoxic is the type of venom that causes cell death. So what it can do is basically prevent the venom from harming the cells. I mean, it's not just snakes. It happens with scorpions. There's this factor comes into play when for toxins like botulism. So opossums really can like not die from things that normally a mammal or other animal of that size would definitely have a problem. It's just like a neutralizing factor in their blood. And excuse me, the goal is, now that they've been able to isolate this, is to create a universal antivenom, which is, if you think about it, that's like the unicorn, so to speak, of antivenoms. It's like malaria, where malaria, or the flu. I mean, let's think small. The flu, where you get your vaccine and you really hope that the strain of the season is the strain that you were vaccinated for. And with this, the hope is to create a universal antivenom that doesn't matter what type of snake or scorpion, etc., that you were harmed by, that this universal antivenom would work, would be a one-hit wonder kind of thing for everything. And that is something that they've been chasing for quite some time, from what I understand. But yeah, I think I found that there's like 40 something different antivenoms, and they're uh based on the species, so you have to know what snake you were bit by, and it has to be within a certain location. I don't know if you guys have a lot of venomous snakes in Canada. I don't think that you do, but unfortunately the US, we have them. We have them in New York. We have timber rattlesnakes in New York. So knowing what kind of snake you are bit by means knowing what kind of antivenom you're going to get, because the wrong one would be ineffective. So it's pretty interesting stuff. So the science is really cool with the opossum. The other thing that a lot of people say is actually true is that they do have a resistance to rabies. So all mammals are susceptible to rabies. We recently had a beaver, which was the first for me. I had not seen a positive rabies case in a beaver before, and we recently had one this year. So all mammals are susceptible, but because the opossum's core body temperature is so low, it's not beneficial for viruses. They don't survive. So it's not just rabies. So the distemper virus, parvovirus, stuff like that opossums are exposed to, typically they don't survive because they can't replicate. They can't they just don't survive. So if you see a opossum circling or unable to walk or stand, it's more likely that it's injured or has lead toxicosis than that it would have rabies. Unfortunately, they do carry diseases that are a risk to humans and domestic animals. But because they are less susceptible to rabies doesn't mean they're less susceptible to other things. So the other diseases that they carry, some of these might sound familiar: leptospirosis, tuberculosis, relapsing fever, which is a relative of Lyme disease, tularemia, which is uncommon, but can be scary, Rocky Mountain spotted fever, toxoplasmosis, salmonella, coccidiosis, trichomoniasis, mycobacteriosis, and Chagas disease. And I'm pretty sure you guys don't have Chagas disease in Canada. That's related to trypanosome. I'd have to think of the parasite, Trypanosoma cruzi, which is parasite found in a bug that's tropical. I don't know that Canada is classified as tropical these days, but give it another decade or so, climate change might catch up. But they don't harbor diseases normally found in dogs and cats, like distemper, parvo, or feline hepatitis. Those are things that they don't have. But I apologize. One of the big things is the poop. Get back to the poop picture. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way. There we go. The feces is the most harmful thing about opossums. Can't say that about a lot of things, but their poop is the biggest problem. So if you can recognize opossum's feces, so that you know to clean it out of your yard, etc. Always wear gloves, please. You can prevent any real exposure And I know, a lot of dogs, eat poop. It's just a thing dogs do. Um, and with any wild animal, there's always a risk. The biggest risk, of course, is going to be like the bacteria, salmonella, even E. coli, and parasites, roundworms and tapeworms. Pretty much any wild animal has those. So there are things to be concerned about. I have I've not had any cases of um recognizing opossum poop because to me it looks like cat poop, and unfortunately there's a feral cat population down here, unfortunately, and uh dogs and Tootsie Rolls are just like a match made in heaven. So as long as your animal is vaccinated on preventatives, um, the risk is minimal. But I don't know a lot of people who are hanging out playing with poop, that are, at risk, aside from small children. So, because they put anything in their mouth. And not much you can do about that, unfortunately. But I don't I don't know that I've personally spotted opossum poop in my yard that I've been able to identify as opossum poop. I found a picture and I thought it would be helpful. And every time I look at it, all I think of is cat poop. So, I think it's just a good thing to be aware of. Of course, cats spread toxoplasmosis, leptospirosis, salmonella, all of those same things as well. And the only other thing that is a real concern for domestic animals with opossums are fleas, ticks, mites, and lice. And that is pretty much with any animal. I think the biggest thing is the flea-borne typhus. There have been cases of that in California, in urban opossums that have had close proximity to homeless camps. That's been linked to the transmission of flea-borne typhus, but I don't think that's widespread beyond that. I've not had a concern that I'm going to get typhus from being close to an opossum, but unfortunately, dogs who are always excited to see an opossum are more likely to get fleas, ticks, etc. from an opossum. The biggest concern that most people have about opossums are people with horses. So EPM, equine protozoal myeloencephalitis, is a neurologic disease that horses get, and that's mostly because their hay is on the ground or their feed isn't secure, and or their water is too low. They don't have like a trough that's high enough. And it's actually very serious in horses, and it's often fatal. The neurologic signs are not reversible. So it's not an awesome way to go for a horse, because once they get in the bloodstream, so what it is they ingest the feces, the parasite in the feces, the opossum's feces, like they get in their food, they get in their hay, etc., and it travels to their digestive tract and gets absorbed in the bloodstream. And then either the horse has a response or it doesn't, and it doesn't develop neurological signs, or it does, and then the horse develops pretty serious neurologic problems. It usually what happens is the protozoa gets into the central nervous system, and it's not really much you can do from there. So just for the folks with horses out there. And I'll wrap it up with some really cool information on what living with opossums is like. So they really are not aggressive. They're really not destructive. They don't chew things. They're not like squirrels where they could chew a hole in your house. They don't really dig underneath your house if they don't have to. They really only want a burrow that's already ready to go. Turnkey is the way to go for them. They want you to leave them alone. They are pretty much similar. You can't really tell the difference between males and females at a distance. The males are a little bit bigger and have more prominent canines, but otherwise you can't tell the difference unless you see like obviously a female carrying babies on her back or in her pouch. And they are actually awesome for pest control in your yard. They eat pretty much anything that you can think of bug-wise, including venomous bugs, cockroaches, crickets, unfortunately spiders, snails, slugs, any bug that they can get their little mouths on, they'll eat. And they've also been attributed to a lot of seed dispersal for fruit trees. So they will come along and eat apples, pears, crab apples, share any of the things that fall on the ground. An opossum will come and make a meal of. Very happy to do that. And then you guessed it, poop out the undigested seed, and there you go. As they wander the landscape, their own Johnny Appleseed. And then here's the other thing that people don't know about opossums. They actually will eat mice, shrews, voles. Voles are venomous. They can eat voles. They also do eat snakes, slugs, and toads. I find having snakes and toads on my property beneficial because they are the ones that keep the slug population down. But and they also get rid of pretty much any dead animal that's on your property. They'll make a beeline for it. And they do have a nickname down here, Nature's Little Sanitation Engineer. And it's because they eat everything. They won't walk away from a carcass. They will eat it all. And here's one of my favorite memes of this cat very upset that this opossum has eaten her cat food, and that is common. Opossums love feral cat populations. They can live amongst them actually quite easily because people keep putting food out, and the possum will just keep coming and eating it. They don't care about the cat. As you can see, it's about the same size as the cat. I think the cat's pretty upset, more than the possum is. So, they're really nice to have in your yard, in my opinion. Wood piles and bushes are really nice hiding spots for them. Like I said, I found them in my wood pile. Unsecured trash is always bad. In this area, we see black bears. I'm sure you guys see black bears in Canada as well, and they enjoy urban environments because those unsecured trash cans are just like a buffet. So there's a lot of things that'll keep an opossum coming back, and depending on where you are, whether or not you have young children, do you have dogs that you're concerned about or elderly, anything like that, then I'd be more concerned. But in general, opossums are harmless and will ignore you if you ignore them. So I think the last thing I had was, this is hilarious. So I would recommend, if you want to just enjoy a good laugh, it's called True Facts. It's a little video. It's maybe 10 minutes long. I would recommend anybody who's interested in some facts about opossums with a little bit of off-color humor. Please enjoy that. I wasn't going to play it. I just wanted to share it in case anybody was interested. And I think that is my last slide. Oh, I had some references, and I'm very happy to forward the PDF of the um, PowerPoint if you guys are interested. And hopefully you learned some interesting stuff about opossums. I'm sorry, I think I ran a little bit long. But if anybody had any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah, go ahead.
Good question. I buried an opossum earlier this year, and it definitely was dead because the wasps were in its eyes, you know, so it's been dead quite some time. And I buried it. Nothing's dug it up. But I have to tell you, there are more opossums around because they poop and poop and poop everywhere. And I clean it up on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And I have to put it in the garbage, so I hope I'm doing the right thing with that.
Yeah, that's the best thing. So either you are in between a place that they call home and a food source, or you have a food source in your yard that they keep coming back. And yeah, opossums poop as they walk. They don't stop and take a break. They don't try and find a comfy place where no one can see them. They just boop, keep going.
Yeah, I've got a garden shed full of mice.
Ah.
And I feed the birds, so there are seeds in the area too.
Oh yeah, he's going to keep coming back until there is no food for them. So for me, I don't have a concern about opossums strolling through my yard, but and I have horses, but I keep my feed and my hay and everything off the ground so that there's no risk. But I I would suggest if you're looking to avoid all the poop, you would have to probably take a week or two of no feeding your birds or any of that to deter them from coming back. But are you in a suburb area? Are you in town? Are you rural?
I'm down near Lake Ontario, so it's in
And not far from a creek.
Oh, yeah.
I don't mind them. I don't mind them, but it's just that the whole lawn is creeping Charlie, and I've got one patch of really nice grass, and that's where they use it.
That's actually hilarious. So there's not a lot that deters opossums aside from removing food. Some of my friends do dog hair. Um, and I don't know how well that works. You know how they say if you put out something that smells like a predator, animal will avoid it. So you could if you had a dog or you had a friend that had a dog that you could get some access to the hair, you might be able to get it away from your one patch of nice grass at least, to maybe get it going somewhere else.
Anyone else?
Anybody on Zoom with questions? Hold on one sec. Hold on one sec. Right. Nope, just a thank you.
Okay.
Oh.
So thank you, Jennifer. Very comprehensive, very fun. You certainly show your passion for the opossum, and that comes out loud and clear. So thank you very much for spending your Thanksgiving with us. Much appreciated.
Very welcome. They're very interesting, and I find that if you take a few minutes to explore something that you've seen, you find out so many really cool things about it. The more you go, the more you dig. I did a thing on coyotes last year, and I was so surprised by some of the information that I found about them that was very contradictory to what I had generally believed. So very happy to have been here to expose you guys to the marsupial of North America.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay, so you're gonna throw up some slides, right? Yeah. Okay, so we're not gonna see you until January, I think it's 30th or 31st. 31st, there we go. Orchid Quest. So even though it's gonna be cold and maybe blustery outside, in here, we're gonna be looking at all the beautiful orchids that can be found in Ontario. And William and Audrey, they're a couple who went off on a journey to photograph orchids throughout the province. So they'll be sharing that with us. Marina will send you any of our outings that are going out, and your AGM package will come probably mid-January. So before the next meeting, you'll get all the information that you'll need for the general meeting in February. And remember, Tuesday, Giving Tuesday. Thank you. Good night.